The mess hall buzzed with the usual dinner conversation when Sergeant Maya Rodriguez walked in, her boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. She had just finished a grueling 18-hour training session in the desert, and her uniform showed the dust and sweat of hard work. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes scanned the room for an empty table. Maya had been stationed at Camp Pendleton for only 2 weeks, but she already knew the unwritten rules. New soldiers sat in the back. Veterans got the tables near the windows. Officers had their own section. She grabbed a tray and moved through the serving line, accepting generous portions of meatloaf and mashed potatoes from the kitchen staff. "Thank you," she said quietly to each server, her voice carrying a slight accent from her childhood in Texas. As she turned to find a seat, Maya spotted an empty table in a corner. Perfect. She could eat in peace and review the mission briefings she needed to study later. Tomorrow would bring another round of assessments, and she couldn't afford to make mistakes. But as she walked toward the table, carrying her full tray carefully, someone stuck out their foot. Maya went down hard. Her tray flew forward, sending hot food splashing across the floor and onto her uniform. The metal tray clattered loudly, drawing attention from every corner of the mess hall. Conversations stopped. All eyes turned toward her. "Watch where you're going, newbie," a deep voice said with a laugh. Maya looked up to see Staff Sergeant Derek Thompson standing over her, a cruel smile on his face. He was built like a linebacker, with thick arms and a neck like a tree trunk. His friends at the nearby table were snickering, clearly enjoying the show. "Maybe you should stick to serving food instead of eating it," Thompson continued, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "Though I bet you can't even do that, right?" Maya slowly got to her feet, brushing mashed potatoes off her sleeve. Her face remained calm, but her jaw was set tight. Around her she could feel the stares of hundreds of Marines. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed entertained by the spectacle. "I said I'm sorry," Maya replied evenly, though she hadn't actually apologized for anything. "Sorry doesn't clean up this mess," Thompson shot back. He gestured at the scattered food on the floor. "Maybe you should get down there and lick it up like the dog you are." The words hit Maya like a slap. She had heard worse during her military career, but never in front of so many people. Never with such obvious intent to humiliate. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she forced them to relax. "I'll get something to clean it up," she said quietly. "No, no, no," Thompson said, stepping closer. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper that only she could hear. "I think you misunderstood me. I said lick it up." Maya's eyes met his, and for a moment the mess hall seemed to fade away. She had been in situations like this before, though never quite so public. In her mind, she calculated distances, angles, pressure points. It would take exactly 3 moves to put Thompson on the ground. She knew this because she had been trained by the best fighters in the world, but she also knew that wasn't why she was here. "I won't be doing that," Maya said, her voice steady and clear. Thompson's face darkened. "What did you say to me?" "I said I won't be doing that, Staff Sergeant." The title came out with just enough emphasis to remind everyone present of military protocol. A staff sergeant outranked her, yes, but that didn't give him the right to humiliate a fellow Marine. Thompson seemed to realize he had pushed too far with witnesses watching, but his pride wouldn't let him back down now. He stepped even closer, invading her personal space. "Listen here, little girl," he said, his voice rising again. "You're new here, so let me explain how things work. I say jump, you ask how high. I say clean, you ask with what. And if I say get on your knees and clean up this mess with your tongue, you better believe that's exactly what you're going to do." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. This had gone beyond hazing or even bullying. This was something else entirely. "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind Thompson. Maya looked past his shoulder to see Captain James Morrison approaching their table. Morrison was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. His uniform was crisp, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen real combat. "No problem, sir," Thompson said quickly, straightening up. "Just having a conversation with the new recruit about mess hall etiquette." Morrison's eyes moved from Thompson to Maya, then down to the food scattered across the floor. "I see. And what exactly does mess hall etiquette involve, Staff Sergeant?" "Well, sir, when someone makes a mess, they should clean it up properly." "I agree completely," Morrison said smoothly. "Staff Sergeant Thompson, please grab a mop from the kitchen and clean up this mess. Sergeant Rodriguez, please come with me." Thompson's face went red. "Sir, I didn't make the mess." "No, but you caused it," Morrison interrupted. "And more importantly, you're the senior-ranking Marine in this situation. That makes it your responsibility to handle it appropriately. Unless you'd like to explain to Colonel Martinez why you felt it was appropriate to humiliate a fellow Marine in front of the entire mess hall." Maya watched Thompson's face cycle through several emotions before settling on barely controlled anger. "No, sir. I'll get the mop." "Excellent. Carry on, Staff Sergeant." Morrison turned and walked toward the exit, clearly expecting Maya to follow. She fell into step beside him, her mind racing with questions. They walked in silence through the corridors of the base, past offices and training rooms, until Morrison stopped in front of a door Maya had never seen before. It was unmarked, with no window, just a heavy metal door with a sophisticated lock system. Morrison pressed his thumb to a scanner, then typed in a code. The door opened with a soft click. "After you, Sergeant Rodriguez." Maya stepped inside and immediately knew this wasn't a normal office. The room was small but packed with high-tech equipment. Multiple computer screens showed maps, satellite feeds, and scrolling text in languages she couldn't identify. The walls were covered with photographs and documents that were clearly classified. "Sit down," Morrison said, gesturing to a chair in front of a desk. Maya sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Morrison closed the door behind them, then moved to his desk and opened a thick file folder. "Sergeant Maya Rodriguez," he read aloud, "age 28, born in El Paso, Texas, graduated top of her class from basic training, expert marksman, fluent in Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin, black belt in 3 different martial arts, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, decorated for valor under fire, currently holds the record for the fastest completion of the Marine Combat Training Course." He looked up from the file. Quite an impressive record for someone Thompson seems to think is just another newbie. Maya said nothing, unsure where this conversation was heading. Morrison continued. "What's particularly interesting is this last entry. Says here you were recruited for a special assignment 18 months ago. Assignment classified above my clearance level, which is saying something. Then suddenly, you're transferred to a regular infantry unit at Camp Pendleton. No explanation, no details." He closed the file and leaned back in his chair. "So here's my question, Sergeant Rodriguez. What exactly did you do that was so important it required the highest levels of classification? And why are you now serving in a standard Marine unit?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not authorized to discuss my previous assignments." Morrison smiled for the first time since she'd met him. "I thought you might say that, which tells me everything I need to know." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. "Let me share something with you, Sergeant. I've been in the Marines for 32 years. I've served in every major conflict since the Gulf War. I've worked with special operations, intelligence units, and forces so secret they don't have names. And in all that time, I've learned to recognize certain types of people." Maya remained silent, but she felt her pulse quickening. People who can speak 4 languages and handle themselves in a fight. People who get recruited for missions above my clearance level. People who carry themselves like they've seen things that would break most Marines. Morrison opened the second folder and spread several photographs across his desk. Maya glanced down and felt her breath catch. The photos showed her in various locations around the world, training with special forces in Germany, meeting with intelligence officers in Dubai, boarding an unmarked aircraft in Thailand. These weren't official military photos. Someone had been watching her, documenting her movements. The thing about special units, Morrison continued, is that they don't just let people go. Once you're in for life. Even when you're transferred to regular duty, they keep tabs on you. They watch to make sure you're adjusting properly, that you're not having problems reintegrating with normal military life. Maya's mind raced. How did he know about her background? Why was he showing her this? So, when I see Staff Sergeant Thompson humiliating someone with your qualifications in front of half the base, I have to wonder if this is the kind of adjustment problem your former handlers might be concerned about. Morrison gathered up the photographs and put them back in the folder. I'm going to ask you one more time, Sergeant Rodriguez. What unit were you with, and why are you here now? Maya considered her options. She could continue to claim ignorance, but it was clear Morrison already knew more than he should. She could try to leave, but something told her this conversation was far from over, or she could trust him with at least part of the truth. I was with a unit that doesn't officially exist, she said finally. We handled situations that required specialized skills. I'm here now because I requested a transfer to regular duty. Why? Because I wanted a normal military career. I wanted to serve my country without having to lie about what I do for a living. Morrison nodded slowly. And how's that working out for you so far? Maya almost smiled at that. Not as well as I hoped. Staff Sergeant Thompson is a problem, Morrison said. He's been a problem for a long time. He has friends in high places, which is why he's still here despite numerous complaints about his behavior. He particularly enjoys targeting female Marines and Marines from minority backgrounds. I can handle Staff Sergeant Thompson, sir. I'm sure you can. That's what worries me. Morrison leaned forward, his expression serious. Here's what's going to happen, Sergeant Rodriguez. You're going to continue your regular duties as if this conversation never happened. You're going to avoid any direct confrontation with Thompson or his friends. And if anyone asks you about your background, you're going to stick to your official record. Maya frowned. Sir, with respect, I don't understand. You don't need to understand. You just need to follow orders. Morrison stood up, indicating the meeting was over. One more thing, Sergeant. Thompson isn't the only one watching you. Your former unit has people on this base. They want to see how you handle yourself in a normal military environment. Consider this your final evaluation. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Sir, what happens if I fail this evaluation? Morrison moved to the door and opened it. Let's hope we don't have to find out. As Maya walked back to her barracks that night, her mind was spinning with questions. Who was watching her? How much did Morrison really know? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do about Thompson? She had requested a transfer to regular duty because she wanted a normal life. She wanted to serve her country without the weight of classified missions and state secrets. She wanted to be just another Marine. But as she lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, Maya began to realize that some things you can never really leave behind. Her past was like a shadow that followed her wherever she went, and now it seemed like that shadow was about to catch up with her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would have to face Thompson again, and next time, he might not be content with just humiliating her in public. Men like Thompson had a way of escalating their behavior when they didn't get the reaction they wanted. Maya closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept replaying the conversation with Morrison. Someone was watching her. Someone was evaluating her. And somehow, she had the feeling that whatever happened next would determine not just her future in the Marines, but her future entirely. The mess hall incident had been just the beginning. Thompson had shown his true colors, and Maya knew he wouldn't stop there. He would push and push until she either broke or pushed back. The question was, which would serve her better in this final evaluation she apparently was taking? To remain the perfect soldier who followed orders and avoided conflict? Or to show them that some people simply couldn't be pushed around? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya made a decision. She would play by the rules as long as possible. But if Thompson crossed certain lines, she would remind him that some Marines had training far beyond what appeared in their official records. She just hoped it wouldn't come to that. 3 days passed without incident. Maya went about her duties with quiet efficiency, attending briefings, participating in training exercises, and keeping to herself during meals. She noticed Thompson watching her from across the mess hall, but he seemed content to glare from a distance. On Thursday morning, Maya was assigned to weapons maintenance duty. She arrived at the armory early, preferring to work when fewer people were around. The familiar smell of gun oil and metal cleaner was oddly comforting. Working with weapons had always calmed her mind. She was field stripping an M4 rifle when the door banged open behind her. "Well, well, look what we have here." Maya didn't turn around, but she recognized Thompson's voice. She continued working, methodically cleaning each component of the rifle. "I'm talking to you." "Rodriguez." "I heard you, Staff Sergeant." Thompson moved closer, his heavy footsteps echoing in the metal-walled room. "You think you're pretty smart, don't you? Running to Captain Morrison like a little girl who got her feelings hurt." Maya carefully set down the rifle's bolt carrier group and turned to face him. Thompson wasn't alone this time. 2 other Marines stood behind him, Corporal Jenkins and Private First Class Watson. She recognized them as Thompson's usual companions. "I didn't run to anyone," Maya said evenly. "Captain Morrison approached me." "Same difference," Thompson said. He was standing too close again, trying to intimidate her with his size. "The point is, you made me look bad in front of the entire mess hall. That's something I take very personally." Maya glanced at Jenkins and Watson. Both men looked uncomfortable, as if they weren't entirely sure they wanted to be part of whatever Thompson had planned. "I was just trying to eat dinner, Staff Sergeant. I never intended to cause any problems." Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, you intended to show everyone that the new girl was too good to follow simple orders. You intended to embarrass me. That's not what happened." "That's exactly what happened," Thompson snapped. His face was getting red again, the way it had in the mess hall. "You think because you got some fancy training somewhere that you're better than the rest of us? Well, let me tell you something, sweetheart. I've been doing this job since you were playing with dolls." Maya felt her jaw tighten at the word sweetheart, but she kept her voice level. "I have no doubt about your experience, Staff Sergeant. I'm just here to do my job." "Your job," Thompson repeated mockingly. "Your job is to do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it. And right now, I'm telling you to get on your knees and apologize for making me look like a fool." The room went very quiet. Maya could hear the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant sound of Marines training outside. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably behind Thompson, while Watson was staring at the floor. "I'm not going to do that," Maya said. Thompson's smile turned ugly. "See, that's your problem. You don't understand the chain of command. You don't understand respect. Maybe we need to teach you." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach, the same feeling she'd had in the mess hall. But this time, there was no Captain Morrison to interrupt. This time, there were no witnesses except Thompson's friends. "Jenkins," Thompson said without taking his eyes off Maya, "lock the door." Jenkins hesitated. "Sarge, maybe we should—" "Lock the door." Jenkins reluctantly moved to the door and turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the room like a gunshot. Maya's mind automatically began calculating her options. The armory was small, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet. The door was now locked, But there was a window near the ceiling that might be accessible. 3 opponents, but only Thompson seemed truly committed to whatever this was. The other 2 were followers who might back down if things got serious. "Now," Thompson said, stepping even closer, "let's try this again. Get on your knees and apologize." "No." Thompson's hand shot out toward her shoulder, intending to push her down. But his hand never made contact. Maya moved like water, flowing around his grasping fingers and stepping to the side. Before Thompson could react, she had grabbed his wrist and twisted it, applying pressure to a nerve point that made him gasp in pain. "Don't touch me," Maya said quietly. Thompson tried to pull away, but Maya maintained her grip, keeping just enough pressure on the nerve to cause discomfort without permanent damage. It was a technique she had learned from experts who understood that sometimes the threat of pain was more effective than pain itself. "Let go of me," Thompson growled. "Are you going to touch me again?" "Let go of me right now, or I'll—" Maya increased the pressure slightly. Thompson's knees buckled, and he had to lean against a workbench to stay upright. "I asked you a question," Maya said. "Are you going to touch me again?" "No," Thompson said through gritted teeth. Maya released his wrist and stepped back, putting distance between them. Thompson cradled his hand against his chest, his face a mixture of pain and humiliation. "What the hell was that?" Watson asked, his voice high with shock. Maya ignored him, keeping her eyes on Thompson. "I think we're done here, Staff Sergeant." But Thompson wasn't done. The humiliation of being controlled by someone half his size, especially in front of his friends, was more than his pride could handle. His face darkened with rage. "You want to play games?" he said, flexing his hand to make sure it still worked. "Fine, we'll play games." He nodded to Jenkins and Watson. "Grab her." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Watson stepped forward reluctantly, reaching for Maya's arm. Maya didn't want to hurt him. Watson was young, maybe 19, and she could see the reluctance in his eyes. He was following orders from a superior, even though his instincts were telling him this was wrong. So when Watson reached for her, Maya simply stepped back and swept his legs, sending him sprawling across the floor. He wasn't hurt, just surprised and embarrassed. Jenkins, however, was a different story. He was older, more experienced, and unlike Watson, he seemed to understand exactly what they were doing. When he came at Maya, it was with the clear intent to restrain her by whatever means necessary. Maya let him get close, then grabbed his uniform shirt and used his own momentum to throw him into a rack of weapons. Jenkins crashed into the metal shelving, sending rifles clattering to the floor. Thompson was advancing on her now, his injured hand forgotten in his rage. He was bigger and stronger than Maya, but he was also angry, which made him sloppy. Maya had been trained to fight people who were bigger, stronger, and better armed than she was. Thompson threw a punch that would have broken her jaw if it had connected. Maya ducked under it and drove her elbow into his solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. As he doubled over, gasping for air, she stepped behind him and applied a blood choke that cut off circulation to his brain. Thompson struggled for a few seconds, then went limp. Maya lowered him to the floor carefully, making sure he was in a position where he could breathe properly. He would wake up in a minute or two with nothing worse than a headache and a wounded ego. The armory was silent, except for the sound of Watson groaning and Jenkins trying to untangle himself from the fallen weapons. Maya looked around at the 3 Marines and felt a deep sadness settle over her. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. This was why she had requested a transfer to regular duty. She was tired of violence, tired of having to prove herself with her fists instead of her competence. "Watson, are you hurt?" she asked, extending a hand to help him up. Watson looked at her hand suspiciously, but accepted the help. "I don't think so," he said. "Maybe my pride." Maya smiled despite herself. "Pride heals faster than bones." Jenkins had extricated himself from the weapons rack and was checking for injuries. He had a cut on his forehead from where he'd hit the metal shelving, but it didn't look serious. "We need to get Thompson to the medical center," Maya said. "He's fine, just unconscious. He'll wake up soon, but someone should check for a concussion." Jenkins stared at her. "You're worried about his health? After what he just tried to do?" Maya knelt down and checked Thompson's pulse. It was strong and steady. "He's still a Marine. He's still our responsibility." "Jesus," Watson said quietly. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Before Maya could answer, there was a loud knock on the door. "Open up in there. This is Captain Morrison." Maya, Jenkins, and Watson looked at each other. Thompson was still unconscious on the floor, surrounded by scattered weapons. "This is not going to look good," Jenkins said. Maya walked to the door and unlocked it. Morrison stepped inside, took one look at the scene, and shook his head. "Sergeant Rodriguez, what happened here?" Maya came to attention. "Sir, there was an altercation. Staff Sergeant Thompson is unconscious but uninjured. I recommend he be taken to medical for evaluation." Morrison's eyes moved from Thompson to the scattered weapons to the obvious signs of a fight. "And how exactly did Staff Sergeant Thompson become unconscious?" Maya hesitated. She could tell the truth, which would probably result in criminal charges against Thompson, or she could protect him, even though he had tried to assault her. "He fell, sir," she said finally. "Hit his head on the workbench." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "He fell." "Yes, sir." Morrison looked at Jenkins and Watson. "Is that what happened?" Jenkins opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Watson was staring at the floor. "I see," Morrison said. "And I suppose the weapons just happened to fall off the rack at the same time." "It was an accident, sir," Maya said. "We were moving equipment when Staff Sergeant Thompson lost his balance." Morrison nodded slowly, though his expression made it clear he didn't believe a word of it. "Jenkins, Watson, go get a medic. Tell them we have an unconscious Marine who needs evaluation." The two men practically ran from the room, leaving Maya alone with Morrison and the unconscious Thompson. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Morrison said once they were gone, "I think it's time you and I had another conversation." 20 minutes later, Maya was once again sitting in Morrison's secure office while Thompson was being examined in the medical center. Morrison had closed the door and activated what looked like an electronic jamming device. "Off the record," Morrison said, "what really happened in that armory?" Maya met his gaze. "Staff Sergeant Thompson and 2 others attempted to assault me. I defended myself using minimum necessary force." "I see. And why did you lie about it?" "Because I didn't want to ruin 3 Marine careers over what was essentially a misunderstanding." Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A misunderstanding? Sergeant, I've been getting reports about Thompson's behavior towards you all week. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an escalation." Maya said nothing. Morrison opened his desk drawer and pulled out a secure phone. He dialed a number from memory and waited. "It's Morrison," he said when someone answered. "We have a problem." "Yes, she's here." "No, she's fine, but the situation is deteriorating faster than expected." "I understand. Yes, sir." He hung up and looked at Maya. "That was Colonel Sarah Chen," he said. "She's the commanding officer of the unit you used to work for." Maya felt her stomach drop. "Sir, She's flying here tonight. She wants to speak with you personally." "What does that mean?" Morrison leaned back in his chair. "It means your evaluation period is over, Sergeant Rodriguez, and based on what happened today, I think we all know what the results are going to be." Maya stared at him, her mind racing. Colonel Chen had been her commanding officer for 3 years. She was brilliant, ruthless, and completely dedicated to her mission. If Chen was coming here personally, it meant Maya's attempt to live a normal life was about to come to an end. "Sir, with respect, I handled the situation appropriately. I used minimal force and protected the careers of 3 Marines who made a mistake. You handled the situation like someone with advanced combat training and access to classified techniques, Morrison replied. Which is exactly the problem. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. I was supposed to let them assault me? You were supposed to report the incident through proper channels and let the system handle it. The system has been handling Thompson for years, apparently. How's that working out? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Colonel Chen will be here at 0800 tomorrow. I suggest you get some rest and think very carefully about what you want to say to her. As Maya walked back to her barracks that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that her world was falling apart. She had wanted a normal life, a normal military career. She had wanted to serve her country without the weight of secrets and classified missions. But maybe some people were never meant for normal lives. Maybe once you crossed certain lines, learned certain skills, saw certain things, you could never really go back. Tomorrow, she would face Colonel Chen and learn what her future held. Tonight, she would try to sleep and pretend that she still had choices to make. But deep down, Maya knew the truth. The moment Thompson had tried to put his hands on her, the moment she had defended herself with techniques that weren't taught in basic training, her evaluation had ended. Now all that remained was to find out what came next. Maya barely slept that night. She kept replaying the events in the armory, wondering if she could have handled things differently. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thompson's face as he lost consciousness, Jenkins crashing into the weapons rack, Watson's shocked expression. At 0600, she gave up trying to sleep and went for a run around the base. The morning air was cool and crisp, and the rhythmic sound of her boots on the pavement helped clear her mind. As she ran, she noticed more activity than usual around the main administrative building. Black SUVs with tinted windows were parked outside, and she could see Marines in dress uniforms standing at attention. Colonel Chen had arrived. Maya showered and put on her cleanest uniform, making sure every crease was sharp and every button polished. If this was going to be her final performance review, she would at least look like a proper Marine. At exactly 0800, she reported to Captain Morrison's office. But when she knocked on the door, it was opened by a woman she hadn't seen in 18 months. Colonel Sarah Chen was shorter than Maya remembered, maybe 5 feet 6 inches, with steel gray hair cut in a precise bob. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture perfect, and her dark eyes missed nothing. She had the kind of presence that made people stand straighter without being told. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Chen said, "please come in." Maya stepped inside and came to attention. "Colonel Chen, it's good to see you again, ma'am." Chen smiled slightly. "At ease, Sergeant. Please sit down." Maya took the same chair she had occupied during her previous meetings with Morrison. Chen moved to Morrison's desk, but remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back. "Captain Morrison has briefed me on recent events," Chen said. "I've also reviewed the medical report on Staff Sergeant Thompson. Interesting reading." Maya waited for her to continue. According to the medical report, Thompson suffered a mild concussion and some bruising, but no serious injuries. The doctor noted that his injuries were consistent with controlled application of force by someone with advanced training. Chen picked up a file from the desk and opened it. "I also took the liberty of interviewing Corporal Jenkins and Private First Class Watson this morning. Their accounts were illuminating." Maya felt her heart rate increase. "Jenkins told me that Thompson ordered them to restrain you after you had clearly indicated you didn't want physical contact. Watson confirmed this, and added that you had multiple opportunities to seriously injure all 3 men, but chose not to do so." Chen closed the file and looked directly at Maya. "So my question is this: why did you lie to Captain Morrison about what happened?" Maya considered her words carefully. I felt that the incident was the result of poor judgment rather than criminal intent. I didn't want to ruin 3 careers over what I hoped was an isolated incident. You felt, Chen repeated. You hoped. Sergeant Rodriguez, since when do you make command decisions based on feelings and hopes rather than facts and protocols? Since I requested transfer to regular duty, ma'am. I thought that was the kind of judgment a normal Marine would make. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved around the desk and sat in Morrison's chair. Let me tell you a story. Sergeant Rodriguez. 3 years ago, I was tasked with creating a new kind of unit. Not special forces, not intelligence, but something that combined the best elements of both. We needed people who could blend in anywhere, handle any situation, and make life-or-death decisions without backup or oversight. Maya knew this story, but she listened anyway. We recruited from every branch of the military, looking for people with specific skill sets and psychological profiles. We found linguists who could disappear into foreign crowds, soldiers who could improvise their way out of impossible situations, and fighters who understood that sometimes the most devastating weapon is restraint. Chen opened another file, this one much thicker than the first. We found Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, a young Marine with an unusual combination of talents. Expert markswoman, gifted linguist, natural fighter, and most importantly, someone with the judgment to know when not to pull the trigger. She began reading from the file. Operation Desert Wind prevented an international incident by convincing a group of insurgents to surrender rather than engaging in a firefight that would have killed dozens of civilians. Operation Night Shadow successfully extracted a high-value target from hostile territory without firing a single shot. Operation Golden Eagle spent 6 months undercover in Pakistan, gathering intelligence that prevented 3 separate terrorist attacks. Chen looked up from the file. Do you know what all of these operations have in common, Sergeant Rodriguez? Maya shook her head. In each case, you had authorization to use lethal force. In each case, you chose a different path. You found ways to complete your mission without creating the kind of violence that makes headlines and starts wars. Chen closed the file. That's not normal military thinking, Sergeant. That's not something we teach in basic training or even advanced combat courses. That's an instinct, a gift, a way of seeing the world that can't be taught. Maya felt confused. Ma'am, if that's true, then why was my transfer request approved? Why was I allowed to leave the unit? Chen smiled, and for the first time since Maya had known her, it seemed genuinely warm. Because I needed to know if you could maintain those instincts in a normal environment. I needed to know if your judgment would hold up when you weren't on a classified mission with national security at stake. Maya stared at her. This was all a test? Not all of it. Your request for transfer was genuine, and we honored it. But yes, we've been watching to see how you would handle yourself. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. So, Thompson, the harassment, the assault, that was all just part of your test? No, Chen said firmly. Thompson's behavior was real, and it was unacceptable. We don't create dangerous situations for our people. But when dangerous situations arise naturally, we observe how they're handled. Chen stood up and began pacing around the small office. What happened in that armory yesterday was a perfect example of why you're so valuable to our unit. You were attacked by 3 men, one of whom outranked you and all of whom outweighed you. You had every legal and moral right to defend yourself with maximum force. She stopped pacing and looked at Maya. Instead, you used exactly the amount of force necessary to neutralize the threat without causing permanent injury. You protected yourself while also protecting your attackers from the consequences of their poor judgment. That's not just good training, Sergeant. That's wisdom. Maya felt overwhelmed. But I wanted a normal life. I wanted to be just another Marine. I know you did. And that desire for normalcy, that willingness to walk away from the power and prestige of a classified unit, that's another reason why you're so valuable. Chen returned to her seat behind the desk. Let me be frank with you, Sergeant Rodriguez. The work our unit does is important. We prevent wars, stop terrorists, and save lives in ways that never make the news. But it's also seductive. It's easy for people in our line of work to start believing they're above the rules that govern everyone else. She opened yet another file, this one thin and marked with red classification stamps. Over the past 18 months, we've had to dismiss 6 operatives for various ethical violations. 3 of them started believing they were untouchable. 2 became convinced that the ends always justify the means. 1 simply lost the ability to function in normal society. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She knew some of those operatives. She had worked with them, trusted them. But you, Chen continued, you wanted to walk away from all of that. You wanted to serve your country in a normal way, with normal responsibilities and normal accountability. That tells me your moral compass is still functioning perfectly. Chen closed the file and leaned forward. So, here's my proposal, Sergeant Rodriguez. Come back to the unit, but with a difference. I want you to be my conscience. Maya frowned. I don't understand. I want you to be the person who questions our missions, who challenges our methods, who makes sure we never forget that we're servants, not masters. I want you to be the one who says no when we're about to cross a line we shouldn't cross. Maya stared at her, speechless. Of course, Chen continued. If you prefer, you can remain in regular duty. Your record will reflect that you successfully completed your evaluation period. Staff Sergeant Thompson will be transferred to a different unit, and you can finish out your enlistment here at Camp Pendleton. Maya's mind raced with the implications of both choices. Return to the classified world she had tried to leave, but with a role that might let her make a real difference, or stay in the normal military life she had wanted, knowing that important work was being done without her input. Can I ask what happened to Thompson? Chen smiled grimly. Staff Sergeant Thompson is currently facing a general court-martial for assault and conduct unbecoming. Corporal Jenkins and Private First Class Watson agreed to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. It turns out that several other Marines have come forward with similar complaints about Thompson's behavior. Maya felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that Thompson wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else, but sadness that it had taken a physical confrontation to bring his behavior to light. The Marine Corps takes care of its own, Chen said, but it also holds its own accountable. Thompson forgot that second part. Maya took a deep breath. If I came back to the unit, what would my role be exactly? You would be my deputy for ethics and accountability. Every mission would cross your desk. Every operation would require your approval. If you think we're about to do something wrong, you have the authority to stop it. It was an incredible offer. Maya would essentially be given veto power over one of the most powerful military units in the world. And if I disagree with your assessment of a mission, then we don't do the mission, Chen said simply. I'm serious about this, Sergeant. I've seen what happens when units like ours operate without proper oversight. I won't let that happen to us. Maya looked around Morrison's office, remembering all the conversations they'd had over the past week. What does Captain Morrison think about all this? Captain Morrison has been one of our liaisons for the past 5 years, Chen said. He's the one who recommended you for this role. Maya felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Morrison works for you? Morrison works for the Marine Corps, just like the rest of us. But yes, he's been keeping an eye on you and reporting back to me. Maya shook her head in amazement. Is there anyone on this base who isn't part of this conspiracy? Chen laughed. It's not a conspiracy, Sergeant, it's just good planning. We needed to know how you would handle yourself in a normal environment, so we made sure we had good people in place to observe and protect you if necessary. Protect me from what? Chen's expression grew serious. From situations exactly like what happened with Thompson, we knew there might be people who would see you as a target, either because you're a woman or because you're clearly different from the average Marine. We wanted to make sure you had backup if things got dangerous. Maya realized that Morrison's timely arrival at the mess hall hadn't been coincidental. Someone had been watching, ready to intervene if necessary. So what happens now? Now you make a choice, Chen said. Take some time to think about it. I'll be here for 2 more days, so you don't have to decide immediately. Chen stood up, indicating the meeting was over. But Sergeant Rodriguez, whatever you decide, I want you to know that what you did yesterday was exactly what I hoped you would do. You protected yourself without losing your humanity. You defended yourself without becoming the aggressor. That's a rare gift, and the world needs people who have it. Maya stood and came to attention. Thank you, ma'am. I'll consider your offer carefully. I know you will. Dismissed. Maya left Morrison's office with her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew about the past 2 weeks had been wrong. Thompson's harassment had been real, but her response to it had been observed and evaluated by people who understood exactly what they were watching. She spent the rest of the day walking around the base, trying to process everything Chen had told her. The offer was tempting, a chance to return to important work while also ensuring that the work was done ethically. But it also meant giving up her dream of a normal life. That evening, she found herself back at the mess hall. The room was busy with the dinner crowd, but the atmosphere felt different now. Word had spread about Thompson's arrest, and there was a sense of relief among the Marines who had been targets of his behavior. As Maya moved through the serving line, several Marines nodded to her respectfully. A few even smiled. She realized that somehow, without meaning to, she had become a symbol of standing up to bullies. She found a table in the corner, the same general area where Thompson had tripped her a week earlier, and sat down with her tray. The food was the same military fare she'd been eating for years, but somehow it tasted better. Mind if I join you? Maya looked up to see Corporal Jenkins standing beside her table, holding a tray of his own. He looked nervous but determined. Of course, Maya said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. Jenkins sat down and stared at his food for a moment before speaking. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly, for what happened in the armory, for going along with Thompson's plan. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid to speak up. Maya studied his face. Jenkins was older than she had initially thought, maybe 35, with the weathered look of someone who had seen combat. Why were you afraid? Jenkins sighed. Thompson had connections. He could make life very difficult for people who crossed him. I've got 2 kids at home and a wife who's been out of work for 6 months. I couldn't afford to get on his bad side. Maya nodded. She understood the pressure Jenkins had been under. But that's no excuse, Jenkins continued. I should have stopped him. I should have reported his behavior years ago. How many people got hurt because I was too worried about my own career? You're not responsible for Thompson's actions, Maya said. You're only responsible for your own. Yeah. Well, I'm not very proud of my own actions right now. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Jenkins looked up at her. Can I ask you something? Sure. Where did you learn to fight like that? I've been in the Marines for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone move like you did. Maya considered her answer carefully. I had some specialized training. Jenkins nodded as if he had expected that response. Whatever kind of training it was, I'm glad you had it. Thompson was getting worse. Sooner or later, he was going to seriously hurt someone. What will you do now? Start over, I guess. I'm being transferred to a different unit. It's a chance to prove that I'm better than I showed in that armory. Jenkins finished his meal and stood up. For what it's worth, I think you handled everything exactly right. You could have really hurt all of us, but you didn't. That takes more strength than winning a fight. After he left, Maya sat alone with her thoughts. Jenkins' words echoed something Colonel Chen had said about restraint being a form of strength. Maybe that was the key to her decision. The next morning, Maya requested a meeting with Colonel Chen. They met again in Morrison's office, but this time Morrison was present as well. "I've made my decision," Maya said without preamble. "I'll return to the unit, but with conditions." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Conditions?" "I want regular rotation back to normal duty. 6 months with the unit, 3 months with regular Marines. I don't want to lose touch with why we're doing this work." Chen nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. What else?" "I want the authority to conduct surprise inspections of all unit operations. Not just current missions, but past ones as well. If I find evidence of ethical violations, I want the power to recommend criminal charges." "Granted. And I want protection for whistleblowers. Anyone who reports wrongdoing to me gets transferred to a safe position, regardless of rank or seniority." Chen and Morrison exchanged glances. "That's a big ask," Morrison said. "It could be disruptive to unit cohesion." "Unit cohesion that's built on silence about wrongdoing isn't worth protecting," Maya replied. Chen smiled. "Agreed. Anything else?" Maya thought for a moment. "I want Thompson's case to be handled publicly. No quiet retirement, no medical discharge, no backroom deals. If he's guilty, he faces the full consequences." "Thompson's case will be handled by the book," Chen assured her. "You have my word on that." Maya took a deep breath. "Then I accept your offer, Colonel." Chen stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome back, Sergeant Rodriguez. Or should I say, Deputy Director Rodriguez." 2 months later, Maya was back in the classified world she had tried to leave. But her role was unlike anything she had done before. Instead of conducting operations, she was evaluating them, making sure they met not just legal standards, but moral ones as well. She had already stopped 3 missions that she felt crossed ethical lines, and her recommendations had led to policy changes that affected how the unit operated worldwide. It was challenging work, often frustrating, but she knew it was important. Word had reached her that Thompson's court-martial had resulted in a dishonorable discharge and 2 years in military prison. Jenkins had been transferred to a logistics unit where his experience was valued, but his past mistakes wouldn't put anyone at risk. Watson had been assigned to a training battalion where he was reportedly doing well. As for her own situation, Maya had found something she hadn't expected: peace. She was using her skills to protect people, but in a way that built up rather than tore down. She was still serving her country, but in a role that aligned with her deepest values. Standing in her new office, looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C., Maya reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. A confrontation in a mess hall had led to an assault in an armory, which had led to an offer she couldn't refuse. Sometimes she realized the things that seem like the end of one story are actually the beginning of another. Thompson's attempt to humiliate and assault her had ended his career and transformed hers. His weakness had revealed her strength. His failure had highlighted her wisdom. Maya smiled as she turned back to her desk, where a stack of mission reports waited for her review. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions about right and wrong, new opportunities to ensure that power was used responsibly. It wasn't the normal life she had originally wanted, but it was something better, a meaningful life, a life that made a difference. And for Maya Rodriguez, that was enough.